Before August 15, 1945, the Koreans went through a phase of Japanese rule beginning on August 29, 1910. Around 1905, the Russians and Japanese fought over dominance in the Korean peninsula. On August 5, 1905, the Treaty of Portsmouth was signed with the representatives of the United States, Russia, and Japan all present. When the Korean-Japanese Annexation Treaty was signed in 1910, this made Korea a colony of Japan. The reasoning for making Korea a colony was that they were establishing economic progress under their regime. When World War II broke out in 1939, colonized Korea quickly became part of the Empire of Japan. Japan used Korea's food and livestock to maintain the war. As the war progressed, Japan started to descend, and the Allies pledged to continue the use of military force against Japan until the Japanese army surrendered. This led to the U.S. Dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan to force them to surrender. Shortly after the surrender of Japan, Korean nationalists came together to establish an independent government. Soon, the top political frontrunners became clear: King Il-sung of North Korea and Syngman Rhee of South Korea. King Il-sung fought in the Soviet Army for a short time during World War II. When he returned to Korea after the war, he was appointed chairman of the government of North Korea by the USSR. Syngman Rhee, on the other hand, studied at the United States, earning a bachelor's degree in George Washington and Harvard University, including a Ph.D. at Princeton. When he returned to Korea, he joined the Democratic Council. This was the foundation of the Korean Civil War that would cause the two countries to be in a stalemate to this day. As you see in the map, how Japan is so close to South Korea, this plays a big role because American forces were still in Japan after the surrender of the Japanese army. So when the South Koreans need military aid, this would play a very good role for the Americans to just come over and help South Korea. Also in the top, China is right above North Korea, so later in the war this will play a key role. On June 25, 1950, North Korea launched a full-scale attack against South Korea. This was the first battle of the Korean War, but also the start of the Cold War. North Korean tanks and infantry crossed the 38th parallel with little to no resistance at all from the other side. The UN and the United States both condemned the actions of North Korea, and the UN called all members to lend military aid to South Korea. In response to the invasion, South Korean President Syngman Rhee orders the military and special police to execute anyone he feels will join the communist invaders. This will be known as the Summer of Terror, and more than 100,000 South Koreans were executed. August 4, 1950, American and South Korean forces have retreated to the southeast tip of the peninsula. Over 90% of the country was under communist rule. Over the next 6 weeks, North Korea launched an unbelievable amount of attacks to try and defeat the Americans and finally finish the war. But somehow, the battered Americans held the line long enough for General MacArthur to launch a counterattack. General MacArthur orchestrated one of the greatest tactical victories in U.S. history, a massive land attack 100 miles behind enemy lines, completely catching the North Koreans by surprise and forcing them to retreat. As seen in the picture, the blue line pointing to Incheon is the sneaky counterattack that shows how it allowed the Americans to regain control. In November 1950, Chinese leader Mao Zedong, fearful of the consequences of a hostile American forces alongside his border, sent in over 100,000 soldiers into battle in Korea. As you see, the Americans pushed the North Koreans almost directly into China. By 1951, the Korean War became a stalemate at the 38th parallel again, with no significant advances afterwards. In July 27, 1953, after 2 years of negotiations, U.S., North Korea, and China agree on an armistice without a formal peace treaty. October 1953, diplomats of China, North Korea, and the United States meet to get a final and permanent peace treaty to end the war. This gets shot down amidst angry accusations and counter-accusations on both sides. In April 1954, the U.S. and China try one last time to solve the situation in Korea, but failed to do so. The armed stalemate of the 38th parallel will continue indefinitely. In 2002, a severe typhoon uncovers a mass grave holding the victims of the 1950 Summer of Terror that South Korean President Syngman Rhee ordered against leftists and other political people he feared that would join the communists. This made it almost impossible for the South Korean government to deny the killings ever occurred. More than 36,000 Americans were killed. More than 5,000 South Koreans were killed and more than 1,500,000 in North Koreans killed. This was way too many people killed in a civil war.